Welcome. I hope you're doing well today. Today, we're going to be discussing the different types of board interviews and what they look like in your police hiring process. Let's discuss. Hey, before we get started, listen, down in the description, if you open up the description, you'll see two links. Both of these are my gift to you. One of them is the Getting Started workshop. It's going to walk you through each stage of the hiring process. There's some hidden bonuses in there, like practice written exams, so you can judge where you're at, especially if you have to do multiple exams. If you've already done an exam, listen, still take it, because down the line, you might have to apply to a different department and do another written exam. That's one. The other aspect and the other gift is the free one-on-one coaching call with myself. If you have anything specific to your hiring process that you want to know about and you want to sit down and talk about it and not share it all over social media, sign up for a free call. I will gladly sit down with you and guide you the best way I can to get you hired on the first shot, so you can start getting paid and go out there and make money while serving your community and helping people. Now, board interviews, and what do they mean, and what different types of board interviews are there? So board interviews can be broken down into a few different aspects. If you apply federally, where there's a lot of special agents, right, you're going to have to do multiple interviews, and some of them are board, some of them are individual. Perfect example is take the U.S. Air Marshals, right? They have a board interview where you're going to sit down between 3 to 5 people. You'll come in, you'll do the interview, right? You'll do the board interview. After the board interview, you'll go do your PT test. Or if you pass the board interview, you'll go do your PT test. If you fail the board interview, you just go home. If you pass, you go to PT test. If you pass your PT test, then you go over to your ASAC, your assistant senior agent in charge interview. So in 2 days, you have, in 1 day, you have 2 interviews back to back right after a PT test. Now, yes, one is a board interview, one is an individual interview, but for the general purposes of this, everything is just your board interview, right? Each different aspect of it, doesn't matter if it's individual or multiple individuals, it's your board interview. What's important about the board interview is you have 3 different people assessing you on each one of your answers. While one person may really like your answer and score you really high on that, the other person may not. They may score you, if it's out of 5, one person scores you a 4, the other person scores you a 2, and you just don't know. So you're looking for a very middle of the line yet definitive answer that one portrays you, but 2 also isn't so polarizing that you would push individuals to the complete outside of the spectrum. Right now, granted, hopefully they would balance it out, but if one person gives you a 4 and one person gives you a 1, those aren't balancing themselves out. Now, the one thing that I have seen on multiple different board interviews is I have seen it as it's in one board asking each individual candidate questions, but sometimes that's not always the case. Sometimes you have these multiple board and panel interviews where they need to get through a lot of different candidates, right? So they may have 3 different panels up there, and you may be waiting in line or waiting to have your name called, and you might go to the panel on the right, the person that's sitting to you goes to the panel on the left, and the person that's sitting behind you goes to the panel in the middle, and they're running 3 different interviews at a time. A lot of time, this is for larger agencies that really need to fill a lot of billets and have a lot of qualified applicants, because they don't want to throw away qualified applicants, because if they do, then they might go to a different department. So they want to run through everyone best as possible. However, that might mean that you may get the harder board, right? Or maybe you get the easier board, but let's just assume, for sake of argument, you get the harder board. They're the ones that are grading harder. They're the ones that are asking tougher questions. Now, they should have a standard of questions, right? Any board should have a standard of questions, and it should go something like this when you walk up. Welcome. Thank you for your time, sir or ma'am. I'm so-and-so. This is so-and-so to my right. This is so-and-so to my left. We're going to ask you a series of questions. We cannot elaborate on the questions. Please just, if you need us to repeat it, we can repeat the questions, answer to the best of your ability, and please advise us when you complete your answer. That's usually the instructions you're going to get on the board. Sometimes they might tell you, we're going to ask you scenario-based questions. We're going to ask you generalized questions and scenario-based questions. Or maybe they just won't tell you what questions they're going to ask. They're just going to ask any question they want that's in this packet. And that's the nice part when you have these different panel board interviews. Most of the time they're reading off of a packet and they're not deviating. So everyone's getting asked the same questions. The question that is posed at you now outside of the board is, how prepared are you for it? Do you have a good greatest strength? Do you have a greatest weakness? Have you studied this department, right? Do you know the history of this department? Do you understand their current function? All these things are the things you can control. What experiences can you draw on? If you're, fresh out of college and you haven't had many experiences outside of education, then that's what you draw on. If you've been out of college for a long time, or you never went to college and you've worked for a long time, those are the experience you have to draw on. Always try to draw on work-related experiences first for these panel interviews rather than educational experience. But if education is what you have, then that's what you draw on. Do not make up anything, because it's just going to hurt you in the long run. Additionally, when you're drawing on these experiences, you need to correlate it to the question, right? So don't get so caught up in a story when you're talking to these panels and these boards that you're losing your train of thought of the question. Make sure that you're focusing on the question and your answer is tailored to answering that question. Otherwise, you're just rambling and wasting your time. So you can have these individual interviews, right? Go in and you're individually interviewed by, the ASAC after you've made it to that, or maybe it's the chief's interview, right? It might be the chief's interview, but you have to do your board interview first. Now, your board interview may entail law enforcement officers. It may entail law enforcement and HR individuals. It may just have law enforcement with someone standing in the back who's an HR representative, making sure that there's no bias going on that's evaluating. So you don't really know what you're going to walk into unless you've had prior experience with this department, or maybe someone that has went through the application process recently. Because I will say that departments are changing their processes every single day, all the time, trying to figure out what makes it more efficient to get good candidates through the process. But if you see this and you recognize, okay, hey, my board interview is coming up and I know all the different types of board interviews I can get. I can get a panel interview where there's multiple different boards asking multiple different people questions and we're all broken up. I could get individualized where we're all waiting outside to go through one individual board where there's 3 to 5 people asking questions. Or I might be going through a board interview where this is, one high-level official and multiple HR individuals. I may have a double board, right? Or I may have a double interview where I have my board followed by a chief's interview or an ASAC interview. Each one of these means you need to prepare accordingly. So whatever you answer in the board, if you have another follow-up interview after that, expect that to come up in the questions. If it doesn't, great, that's fantastic. Most of the time, those one-on-one interviews is just seeing if the chief can get time to get to know you and feel you out as an individual and see if they recognize anything outside of that the board didn't catch. Additionally, they could draw on, hey, I see that in the board you answered XYZ to this question. Can you elaborate on that for me? So they might go into a more of an interview style or scenario style interview board. Most of the time that you're going through these, you just need to know that, hey, I can draw on my experience and I can relay what I know. Outside of that, you don't want to go into any more detail than what is true. If you start elaborating, trying to sell yourself so much, you're going to get jammed up. It's going to cost you that department, and they're just going to say, hey, thank you for your time. You can apply again in 3 months or 6 months or whatever they want to tell you when you can apply again. Understand each board can be stressful, but each board can also be very streamlined, right? You go in, you set up, you're in a nice suit, right? You're in whatever correct interview attire you need to be in. You go in, you answer the questions to the best of your ability. You follow directions perfectly based on what they're asking. So you're paying attention when they're talking. And then you just handle the board accordingly. Sometimes you will know what you're going into. Sometimes you won't. But for the most part, if you plan accordingly and you study and you get to know yourself, right? That starts with your resume. If you get to know yourself, these boards won't be an issue no matter which one you get or no matter how many you have to go through. So with that being said, one thing, if you want to know more about the boards, take the Getting Started workshop. It's going to go into a lot of detail about the board process and the whole hiring process in general, plus those hidden bonuses. Additionally, if you're really ready to move forward and you have any questions specific to your hiring process, hurdles, concerns, or even just guidance, reach out to me. I'd love to sit down with you. Free coaching call. My gift to you, both of these. Stay safe, and I will see you next time.